Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 289. My name is NBZ, and I am joined once again by Bally. He's the turtle, you know. He's the hair in the turtle. It's all about like the one who's like eventually gets there, because you know we're having these computer troubles. They're being slow, and you know you'll eventually win the race, Bally. If you just the laptop, if it just lasts for 10 more years, you'll eventually get there. So,
my MacBook is from 2018, and yes, I do everything through my MacBook, and it holds up pretty well, to be honest. But yeah, the battery is dead. The man in the Apple shop said it would cost £280 to replace the battery, and so I've more or less decided I'm going to limp on until my next laptop, which will probably be this year or next year. I don't know. We'll see.
Alternatively, Bally, as I mentioned to you, just buy this thing. It's called a personal computer.
Yeah.
It's quite good,
if I
actually.
did, I would still get a laptop.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? Because, you're not the sort of person who's, like, sitting down at a individual spot the whole time. Like, you're moving things around. And
often, yeah. I like the ability to move about. Here's the thing. I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I already own Final Cut Pro. I'm already on iCloud.
Wow.
So
what a surprise. The Nintendo fan, also the Apple fan. Like, it's like some kind of, like, crossover there, you could say.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense.
I see one day if I do go PC, would it be on top of having a MacBook? I don't know, because
you could do that. You could have a MacBook and a PC. I think
there's something I quite like about just my MacBook for like editing or whatever. I think when Jordan was on the show, I think he was mentioning he likes to edit on his laptop, and then his PC's just for like gaming and other stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I've certainly heard that. I mean, I think a lot of the creative community back in the day were so Mac focused. But then all the programs were just like good across everything, and so it doesn't really matter at this point. Like there's no real benefit to being on either. It's just your preference at the end of the day. So
all the editing software is the same by this point.
Pretty much, yeah. Like it's pretty covered. So yeah, it's whatever you're most used to, and I'm most used to a big old fucking stonking personal computer, which is great. It keeps you warm. It's fucking cold right now, obviously. It's winter.
It keeps you
and
warm, yeah.
This room, sometimes I complain because we record this podcast like in the middle of summer, and I'm like fucking dying, and I can't have my fan on because it ruins the microphone noise.
London's also like 10 degrees warmer than Edinburgh. It's like irrationally hotter.
Yeah, exactly, for no good reason. But at this point in the year, I have that PC running all day, and it's just like kicking heat out. It's great. Love it. Keep me nice and toasty, nice and warm in this room. So that's good stuff. But yes, hello, welcome to the podcast, the show. We're here once again to talk to you about our favourite friends at Nintendo and the video games that we've been playing. Bally, what's our show going to look like today?
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. And for the second segment, we're finally getting back to some standard emails. We're back to our meat and potatoes emails. It's been a while, so we'll get to those in the second segment.
A good old regular podcast. Don't you love to see it? So yeah, it's going to be good. Some good games to discuss. A few different indies, and one of them is a brand new release of 2025, one that both myself and Bally have been playing and have been hotly anticipating. It is, of course, the follow-up to 2022's Citizen Sleeper. Was it that
sounds a little
far
bit
ago?
Late. I feel like it's a little earlier. I don't know.
It was. I think I was surprised by how quickly the sequel came around. So I do believe Citizen Sleeper 1 was actually more recent.
You are right. 2022.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, so it's pretty quick turnaround on this. So Citizen Sleeper 2, it came out, and we have both been playing a good amount of it. I guess for the uninitiated, Citizen Sleeper is a narrative game that revolves around dice and dice rolls, and you basically kind of like everything that you do is revolving around decisions made with those dice, and the dice can be from 1 to 6, and there's lots of little extra additional things they've done since in Sleeper 2, but the base idea is like, okay, you have to to progress this narrative thing or to get further in this thing, you have to place dice in, and you will get results based on like how good your skills are in different areas. So that's kind of the core premise of it. The original game, again, came out in 2022. We both very much enjoyed it. I think it ended up on our top 10 games of the year that year.
It's done well for itself in our top 50 as well, games of all time.
Absolutely. I think the thing that is very distinctive about it is its writing. It's incredibly well written, super sharp, and covers a lot of interesting topics, very political, very engaged in social issues, and just a good good, well-written thing. So yeah, Bally, how much have you played Citizen Sleeper 2 so far, and how are you finding it, I guess, compared to the original?
I'm about 5 to 6 hours in, and I'm finding it maybe a little bit more stressful than the original. There's a few more systems layered on, and so far it's a bit more linear than the original. However, I've just gotten to a point where it seems to have opened up more, and I'm being required to jump around a bit. I'm enjoying it. Like, I think it's quite the I feel like the first game was a lot more about explaining what a sleeper was and what the world was around you, and this game feels a bit more like bang on, like you are being chased, and that's basically the main theme.
It assumes that you kind of have some knowledge about the world and the universe, but I think it still kind of tells you a bit about who you are, what you are. I guess a sleeper, for the uninitiated again, is essentially an emulated consciousness. So people in this world, they could sell themselves to a corporation, sell their body to a corporation, and the corporation puts them in a machine, and that machine basically takes their consciousness, their kind of personality, and it emulates it into a robot's body, and that robot's body then, or android I guess you would call it, then becomes a piece of property for the company itself, right? And
a bit like an avatar.
A little bit like that, and then they're essentially slaves to the system. They have tracking chips within them. In both the first and the second game, you basically play as a sleeper who is disconnected from that, basically freed from your tracking, and so you're not having to worry about, being under the control of them. But then obviously because you've done that, you are very much like sought after, and people will come and chase you down and try and do stuff to you, and this game like kicks off with a bang. You're in a situation with you and your friend, and you're under the control of this very clearly powerful person who has had plans for you, and there's almost like an amnesia thing, because you don't really remember what's happened. So something's happened to your system, you've been rebooted essentially, and then you have to like kind of figure out what's going on. You escape, and the game is basically you're on the run essentially the whole time. Where if Citizen Sleeper 1 was a game about finding your place in a community and kind of building up that sense of community around a singular location, this one is much more about building a crew, basically having a group of people join you on your journey as you adventure through the cosmos and go from planet to planet. And so the first game's kind of map was this larger space that you could explore.
There was a lot more like farming and restaurants and more like Stardew-esque building of systems, I feel like, in the first game, whereas this one so far is very much like, okay, I've got 2 bits of this to recover this, and now I'm moving on to the next place, and now I need to survive this, so I'm going to grab that to do this, and it feels less relaxed in that sense, and more structured towards just your survival and moving on, basically.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think the mechanics reflect that as well. I think Citizen Sleeper 1 did an amazing job of, having that sense of, like, social community, of like the thing that will save us is like people around us, in the face of like horrible other things going on, and there was still this struggle there of like, oh, it's so hard to get by, to scrape by. But I think mechanically it was quite easy to put yourself into a position where you had a load of money and you didn't have to worry about like the stimulant that you had to get in that game to kind of recover yourself. And so it's somewhat I would say separated itself from its narrative a little bit, in that it was, you could kind of like skirt around it, and like the narrative would be like, oh, I'm struggling, but in reality you had loads of money and you could heal yourself whenever you needed, so the stress was alleviated. I'd say early on in Citizen Sleeper 1 it does a really good job of like mechanics and narrative tying together, and then the further you get, the kind of, the less that becomes a cohesive whole. And Citizen Sleeper 2, I would say that's the main difference, is, oh my goodness, I feel like I am scrapping at every turn the whole way through this game, even right at the end where I am. I'm probably a couple hours from the end, and dice are breaking, things are glitching, I don't have enough supplies, so I'm starving, so I'm getting stress. Like, there are a lot of tension mechanics and like things that are going to make you make hard choices. The game forces you to make hard choices because there's no good route in some situations, right?
It's very impressive. It's because you can play a narrative-driven game like a Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us, and those characters will go through stressful situations, and I would argue more often than not that doesn't really cause you, the player, much stress because you're basically watching a film to some degree. You're rarely playing out those stressful situations in the way that character's genuinely feeling that stress in the same way. Whereas in this game, I'll take a very early on contract. I think it's the first contract you do. I was like doing a contract. And I was building all my systems like, right, this guy wants this. I'll just talk vaguely so it's not spoilery. Like, this guy wants this person wants this, right? I need this contract to progress and to survive. I have to get it. Like, I feel stressed if I don't get this contract. Let's go. And then this person I'm with, they're just like, oh, actually, we don't need to get the thing. I really want to destroy the thing because there's all these reasons why I want to do this. And then this character tries to pitch to you, actually, you don't want to go after that contract in the way you were originally going after it. You want to follow what I'm going to do and do this. And that's stressful because I already was on this one-track mind of, I need to do this contract to progress the game. This character comes along and gets in my way and wants to do all this other stuff. And now I went down the other character's path. I wanted to do what they said, but even making that decision was stressful. And it wasn't just narrative, fluffy, watching a film kind of stress. It was, I've stressed and built to this point, and now you're challenging me. It's genuine role playing. Like you're now challenging me to change my existing path, and that felt a lot more meaningful than decision making in other games.
Right, exactly. Yeah, when the actual mechanics of the game are kind of like putting you in that tough position, I think there's the empathy you have with the character who's going through the situation is the same reflected in what you're doing, right? Which I think is it's why video games are cool.
Everyone's scrapping in different ways, and you hear a lot more about that, and you kind of work out, who do I trust, who do I not trust? Like, why am I playing this game? I'm trying to help myself. Am I trying to help these other characters in the world? Or if I help the other characters too much, am I just going to get caught and am I going to die, kind of thing? So it's always a balance.
Yeah, and I definitely think sometimes, like, I'm not sure how things go differently because, okay, so for example, there was a situation where I failed a bunch of checks and I didn't kind of finish out the mission I was supposed to do, but it feels like I still got a consequence of the narrative that was going to happen anyway, you know? I don't know how divergent the narrative path is in some of these moments.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely
that as well.
there's definitely the stress and the tension of it, but then you kind of like get to the end of it and it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's like I missed out on some items or something that would help me, and maybe there is a narrative inevitability to some of these things, but there's definitely stuff like you could, I haven't done this, but there's, when crew members join you, you can say yes or no to them. So I imagine like you could say no to somebody and then you just don't have somebody as a part of your crew for the rest of the game, which imagine, you know, gets rid of optional dialogue, gets rid of side quests. And there's one mission that I did yesterday, a little bit later in the game, where I had to choose to bring one of like 3 characters with me, and the character I chose ended up being a perfect choice because of their relationship with the other character I was encountering on the place I was going to. And that was very satisfying.
Was that by luck or plan?
I think it was really interesting because the game suggested like, this guy you're going with might be a bit sus, take someone you trust with you. And so I took the person I trusted with me, and I think the game probably nudges everybody in the direction to trust this person, especially if you played the first game. There's one character you come across who is from the first game, and so you're like, oh, I know that person, so I'm more kind of like wanting to trust them because I kind of have that history. But that ended up being a good choice because it ended up they knew somebody in the location I was going to, and so different dialogue played out, and probably a different resolution happened. So I think there's probably a bit of that balancing there as well. Something I wanted to get into was these contracts themselves, right? Because this is a kind of a new thing for this game where you're essentially sent out on a mission. And during that mission, so usually when you're just in the regular areas, you have a health bar, and that health bar goes down by 1 every day. And basically, it's like a life meter. It's like you have to feed yourself to bring it back up to full. When you go out on a mission, you have to take supplies with you, and that life bar isn't there, but the number of supplies you have dictates the number of days that you can spend, or cycles in this case is what they call them, because I guess the concept of a day doesn't exist in space when there is no consistent like metric of time. So yeah, you basically...
I hadn't realized the supplies linked like that. I should have done that.
Oh, did you not realize that?
No, I mean, I've not been in a position to even go on these missions with supplies, so it's not like it's actually affected me that much. I've been really struggling to like get enough supplies.
Oh my god, you must be really struggling, Bally, because like, yeah, you can spend up to 5 days on one of those missions because you can have maximum of 5 supplies, right?
But you can still stay out for 5 days on those missions. You just take stress.
You take stress and you get starving, and yeah, it's not good.
But stress
basically
also heals when you come back from a mission.
Well, it heals by a certain number. So you could get up to like 10 stress. It will only heal 5 of your stress on the return journey.
Yeah, and on one mission I said to you over WhatsApp, I was like, yeah, I didn't really know that the mission had fully ended, and it wasn't overly clear to me that I had to press like Y on the Xbox controller and bring up the map and then travel back to my place. So I just kept cycles going, and I was kind of like, it's kind of like this morbid curiosity, like, okay, but what would happen? This doesn't feel right. Maybe this is right. I don't know. And I kept doubting myself, and then sure enough, I died. And then you kind of get revived, and the game's like, oh, you now have like a permanent notch on your glitch counter, as it were. So this is like the counter at the side, and I think as long as there's a number on that glitch counter, you have a chance of a die being glitched at any point on a new day.
And a glitch dice is really bad because it has a 20% chance of success in a check and an 80% chance of failure, which basically means it always fucking fails.
So I've more or less had a glitch dice every day since that.
So yeah, Bally, you have now got even more hard mode with like permanent glitch. That's really rough.
But I'm just kind of embracing the RPG nature of this, and I've learned my lesson, and I just kind of want to roll with it and see if I can do this. I don't know. Like,
I think it's cool that you can continue the game playing that way, right?
Yeah,
like I think that it just increases the tension even more. It's like,
it's not clear what the chance of getting a glitch dice is, as long as you have the counter up. Right. Because you can have the counter up and not get a glitch dice.
Oh really? Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Maybe not. Maybe that's not actually happened to me. Maybe I'm not making that up. But yeah, it's not good.
No, it's really rough. And like, so not only do the dice glitch, they can also break, which is dependent on stress. So as your stress goes up, the chance of you losing health on a dice increases. So like the stress meter goes up, and eventually it's like, if you roll a 1, if you roll a 2, if you roll a 3, so like every time your stress goes up, there's a higher chance of more things being rolled on the dice that then eventually will chip away at its health. And when a dice breaks, you have to use a specific item to heal it, and you can only do that outside of a mission. So you could be in a mission and dice just like break mid-mission, and you just lose like 2 dice in the middle of a mission, and you're like, fuck. On these missions as well, you can take people with you, so you can have up to 2 companions, and this is where the kind of the skill system comes in. So you have different skills that your character is proficient in, like engineering, endurance, interface, intuit, and then I can't remember the last one, but each of them has like either your character is good at that or is not good at that. And every character you choose, so you have the choice of 3 different classes at the beginning, and every character has like a red column, which means that no matter what, you'll never be able to be good at that skill. And the other skills you can improve. You can basically use your skill points from doing side mission and main missions in order to level those up. And so what that means is it adds additional numbers to your dice. So if you have a dice that's a 2, and you have a plus on that skill, that 2 turns into a 3, which means your percentage chance of doing better goes up. So, the benefit of like being longer, further in the game, is your skills get better, and therefore your dice, even if you have all these glitches and things bothering you, there's a higher chance that you're still able to get through because you've leveled things up and you have skills. But those other 2 people you bring on a mission with you, you can choose people who are more proficient in skills that you're not as good in. So for example, my character has 0 in endurance and will never be able to do endurance stuff. So I always bring Eugene along with me to that mission. So he's one of the characters you meet, and he's usually on my team because he is proficient in endurance. So whenever we come across a skill check I can use his dice to clear that, essentially. So that's kind of the idea behind it. I think it works quite nicely, and you do have a good variety of characters you come across throughout the game. But yeah, those missions are like multiple skill checks, essentially, and so you're doing, you're trying to hope that you have the right dice, that you roll the right dice, and being tactical about it, being like, if I could risk this one, but then I'll get another stress thing on my thing, and then I could get a chance to break one of my dice. So sometimes I end the cycle still with dice left in my inventory because there are dice that's a 1, and like I don't want to use a 1 on a check because I could you could lose stuff, basically.
You can spiral very fast, as I have described. it can all catch up with you, and it feels like you're balancing a lot more plates in this game because you have to keep on top of your food to stop your energy going down, because once your energy goes down you get stressed, and when you get stressed, that's when you get broken dice. That's where you can rack up your stress to the point of getting the permanent glitch meter like I've just described, and it's quite hard to get stress back, and then on top of that you're trying to unglitch your dice as best as you can. You're trying to fix broken dice. Getting the materials to fix broken dice is quite faffy and quite expensive, and I've spent like whole days just trying to roll dice to get money to get my dice fixed, and then I realized but the red meter is catching up with me, and now I need to, like, it's very, very, very stressful, just in a very literal way, straight off the bat, just full on survival, not even engaging with the story that much.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing that I do appreciate about this over the sequel is, as stressful as it is, I think it's better representative of the story they're trying to tell.
Right.
And it is that, because the tension of the game is like you're being chased, right? And so, if the first game was about community, I'd say this one is about that. It's a different type of community. I think this game is very, it's very concerned with collective action, like in terms of groups kind of like banding together against a like larger corporation. That has been a theme, a beat of multiple planets that I've been to at this point. So it seems like it's very much kind of like taking that angle, which makes a lot of sense. And I think that like building up this crew from like disparate groups of people across the galaxy is also that kind of like, we're better with a group of diverse people across, a whole community that's wider than just like our local one, right? Which I think is super cool. And I overall have really enjoyed it. I think the writing is just as good as the first game was. I do get that thing sometimes, I think, everyone does with books, where you read a segment and you're like, wait, I glazed over that, go back and like reread it, and you're like, oh no, now I have the context. And it's just very rich in terms of its world building and its storytelling. And there's definitely things that go over my head sometimes with some of the kind of sci-fi space jargon, and sometimes I'm like, what are we going after? What's this thing that we're trying to steal? And I don't really know, but I'd say the heart of it, which is the character relations, are always well written and well realized.
Totally.
And that's the thing that has really honed in on. So
and the art is just superb. Like, it's fantastic. I was just reading online that the artist Guillaume Singelin, he's French. He
I didn't know that. Okay.
Also did the art for Gumbrella.
Oh, interesting. I would not have expected that. That's an interesting pull.
Did the key artwork.
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think. I feel that these games do feel quite distinct in that way, and that's sometimes a worry with the sequel, right? Is like, okay, it's not going to have the same impact as the original, because the original was like, wow, I've never played something like this before, and it really kind of hooks you in that way. And I would say this game is still as hooky. Like, I still can play it and not realize time has passed, and I'm like, oh my god, it's 1 a.m. I'm still playing this game. But I think it's hooky in a different way, and I think it's it's doing different things while still being thematically connected, and just like mechanically connected as well. So I'd say as a sequel, I'd still say it's worth playing the first game instead of like just jumping to this and jumping and doing this. And I do think that you are rewarded for playing the first game and then playing this, especially if you play them close to each other, because they're, like I said, there's at least one character that crosses over between the two. And so yeah, you'll probably get a lot out of it from that perspective. But yeah, I think. Yeah, any other kind of like thoughts that we haven't addressed, Bally, in specific things for Citizen Sleeper 2?
I agree with you about like some of the space jargon. We're not very spacey people.
No.
And it's very space punk. But it doesn't get in the way of like understanding what's going on too much. And you read a lot more than me, MZ, and I'm still broadly understanding what's going on for the most part, which is good. So if you're not a big reader and this game is all reading, I would still definitely recommend it because it's that good.
Yeah, and it's not flowery language either. Like, it's just very well delivered and sharply written. And yeah, you got a good sense of the characters. I will say, I don't know, I don't love the kind of your companion Seraphim. Like, I took a bit of time to warm up to him, I think. I think he kind of like comes into his own later. But I don't know, it didn't feel like there was characters and relationships in Citizen Sleeper 1 that I liked a bit more, I will say, overall, as a point of comparison. Like, I still remember, like, the ramen guy who you just keep going back to.
He's very early on. Like, I think the first game was very quick to say, right, here are 3-4 characters that are just very warm, very friendly, that you can return to for basically the whole game and you can trust. And that was a nice feeling in what was otherwise still a very stressful game, at least at the start, and just kind of working through that world. Whereas this game, you're right, Seraphim is a bit
spiky.
It's a bit spiky, and like I've got a quest at the moment that I'm going to find more out about something that he's related to. So I'm kind of working on that. But yeah, you don't feel like that warm blanket, but then the stress is also turned up to 11 on top of that. So yeah, it's a tough game from a kind of emotional perspective, at least initially.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think I still definitely strongly recommend it to people. It's kind of unlike anything else out there, and yeah, just very compelling on a gameplay level. Like, there's something about like having the dice and being like, okay, I could use this 5 here with the +1. That's a guaranteed positive outcome. Do I want to risk my 2? It's a 50-50 chance, but if I do it today, then I could, do this earlier, and then tomorrow I'll get new dice rolled. And yeah, there is that tension still, and that kind of like that satisfaction of just the dice decision making, like I really like that.
Do you think the dice are pure? And what I mean by that is, like, do you think the percentages they tell you are always completely accurate, or do you think the game occasionally is like, he's really suffering, let's give him a helping hand? Because I sometimes feel like, well, I'm going to fail this mission anyway, I'm low health, why don't I just roll these dice? And it pays off, and I'm like...
It gives you like 3 4s and a 5 and a 6, right? And you're like, oh...
Not the dice that you get at the start of the day. I mean, sometimes when you put in a low power dice into a system and
you get a positive outcome from it.
Yeah, and you get a positive outcome. That's why.
Interesting.
I don't know. Maybe I'm lucky, but I can't be that lucky because I still got a red notch. So
yeah. No, I was thinking what I mentioned, which is like, does it fudge the dice that you roll at the start of the day, to give you better ones?
Yeah.
That's and I do think there probably is some of that. I think there's definitely a balance in games, like, because I know definitely a lot of games do this, which is the player doesn't realize that the game is kind of tipping the odds in their favor.
But that's what a good dungeon master is, right? And we're playing an RPG.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And I do think that that's part of the design, and I think it's well balanced in that way, because there's definitely moments where I've been like, I just really need this, and it comes through, and you make it. And I will say, as tough as things have been, as high the tension has been, most of these missions, like, I'm on the edge of my seat, but I do come out of it with the positive outcome. Like, I managed to save this person from a place. I managed to get the thing that I was trying to steal. Like, I managed to convince the person to do the thing. Like, I always seem to come out of it with the outcome I wanted, even though it feels like, I'm on a knife edge here and I'm not going to do it.
I think that takes a hell of a lot of maths behind the scenes to make.
Yes.
And not just maths, but to create that emotional feeling that, I just made it, kind of like takes some pretty clever game design.
Absolutely, yeah, and Gareth Damian Martin, one of the smartest ones out there. They had a game that came out on Steam that I don't believe was on other platforms called In Other Waters, which was their first release before Citizen Sleeper, and I've been meaning to check that out for a while. So maybe if we're waiting a long time, because I believe they have said that Citizen Sleeper 2 is the last game in the series. There's not going to be a Citizen Sleeper 3. So if we're waiting for another game from this developer, then I might check that out as well. But so it's a good example as well of a game that potentially on Switch 2 could use the mouse control. It has that option too. I'm sure it plays great on controller. I've been playing it on PC, which is very easy to like drag dice to where you need them to go. I imagine that controller for you, Bally, has been relatively straightforward, right?
It's okay. You're not rolling so many dice all the time that it's that finicky. I think the most finicky is when you're on a contract and your crewmates, their dice spots are like bottom right and bottom left.
Right.
And
yes.
I think sometimes the UI is a little bit over stylized, and what I mean by that is the skill tree or selecting the dice. Sometimes it's just a little bit unclear. Okay, what am I meant to be looking at right now? And they've definitely weighed a little bit too much on the right. We need to keep it space themed, and it's yellow on black and white on black. Like there's quite a stark style to it that sometimes I find a little jarring, especially when I'm like, okay, but what am I meant to be looking at right now?
Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, hopefully it doesn't get in the way of the game too much. So
no.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Great. Well, yeah, go check it out. Citizen Sleeper 2. Starward Vector is the subtitle there.
Yeah.
Very
we'll
cool.
Beat it for next time.
Yeah, very cool subtitle. And yeah, I'll beat it this weekend. By the time this episode goes up, I probably will have finished it. But yeah, looking forward to closing it out. Some really good stuff in that game. Cool. So I have also played another new release from 2025. Played a little while ago because it came out in the middle of January, but obviously we had our Game of the Year episodes and then had our predictions, so I've not had a chance to talk about it. But it is, hey, guess what? It's another Metroidvania. On my Groove Bally, we're playing loads of Metroidvanias still. I'm trying to clear out the backlog of Metroidvanias, Ender Magnolia came out of early access this year, and people love that. My friend at work, Ed's a big fan of both of those, and he was just raving to me about Ender Magnolia, so I'd need to get on to Ender Lilies, the first one, and Ender Magnolia at some point as well. But yes, Metroidvania in a series that I am a big fan of. I wouldn't call it a series. I would say the developer I'm a big fan of, which is Team Ladybug. They made Touhou Lunar Nights, a bullet hell kind of focused Metroidvania that used the Touhou IP that was extremely difficult but very, very satisfying. They also made Record of Lotus War Deedler in Wonder Labyrinth, the most simply named game of all time, that was based on an anime property but was another excellent Symphony of the Night style Metroidvania. And their most recent release has been quite well advertised by Nintendo. It was part of Indie World presentations and other things, and they have been pushing it a little bit. And that game is called Blade Chimera. And yeah, so you probably will have seen this as part of things that Nintendo put out there. But it is another Metroidvania in the style of those previous ones that they have done. Very, very crunchy pixel art. Very, very nice aesthetic. But this one was interesting because it featured more of like gunplay in it, and there's not many Metroidvanias out there that do that. I'd say like Shadow Complex is one of the ones that most people would think of that uses like more militaristic guns and things. But this is kind of like sci-fi futuristic-y Metroidvania, and yeah, you use guns as a weapon. You can also use other swords and things like that. And basically the way it works is you have two attack slots, so you can have your X button, your Y button. One of them is you can use as a physical attack. One of them you could use as a gun, or you could use them both as guns, or you could use them both as physical attack. The game doesn't really mind. It kind of lets you customize however you want to.
Do you find you need guns more than physical attacks, or you like one of each?
I think the bosses and stuff are kind of designed around using both. Like, there'll be bosses that are kind of flying in the air for a while, and you're like, well, the only way I can hit this easily is with a gun. So I found, for the most part, I was keeping myself with a strong gun and a strong weapon, like whether it be a whip or a sword or whatever, the whole game, just to balance things out. But yeah, it plays super well, very, very tight. I think this game has loads of cool ideas, and I don't think it fully realizes all of them, but I think the thing I really like about Team Ladybug Metroidvanias is that they're not just like bog standard, like, oh, you're gonna get a double jump, you're gonna do this. Obviously you get all those things, you get like a slide and that stuff, but there's always a core mechanic that is like slightly different. In Touhou Lunar Nights, it was the kind of like pausing time bullet hell stuff, where if you grazed bullets, by grazing, I mean getting close to them without being hit, you would fill up this meter, and that meter would allow you to like pause time and then like send out like thousands of knives at once, or like do these crazy attacks. The Record of Lotus War had this basically like Ikaruga system where you switched between wind and fire, and so like enemies that did fire attacks, if you're in your fire state, they would do no damage to you. Likewise, if they did a bunch of wind attacks and you're in your wind state, they do no damage to you. So you could avoid damage from whole enemy fights by just using these mechanics. Very cool. So this one called Blade Chimera, the eponymous blade in the title is basically it's like Fi from Skyward Sword. It's a sword that talks to you. It's like a ghost sword. It's a big green sword that's on your back. And so you can use that sword in combat, but that's separate from your regular weapons, right? So your X and Y button weapons are like your ones you pick up from the floor or your ones you find from enemies, just like in a regular Castlevania game. But your big green sword is one that actually can be used for a lot of different things. So it can be used in traversal. So instead of having a double jump, what this game does, well, you eventually do get a double jump, so that's the whole thing. But before you do that, it's a weird one as well, because in this game there's a skill tree where you unlock the double jump. So things like sliding under a low wall, like the morph ball, or double jump or triple jump even, you get those from a skill tree where you invest points into it as opposed to finding them in the world. So it's kind of a player driven thing instead. But the sword itself, before you get that, you can embed it into a wall and use it as a platform. So like you jump, you embed the sword, and then it becomes a platform that you jump onto. And you can call it back to you as well. You also can use it as a shield. So you can stick it in the ground and you basically get a bubble shield over you. And that bubble shield protects you from any projectiles that come towards you. And you can kind of like attack enemies while just being safe within the shield. The other thing it does is that if you leave the shield in the ground for long enough and you build up enough projectile damage onto the shield, it basically absorbs all of it. And then when you call the sword back to you, your health comes back. So it's like a health regeneration tool. So the idea is there's like lots of enemies shooting stuff at you. You plop down your sword into the ground. You can attack them. And if you like go out the shield and you get hit by damage, then that shield, as long as it's taken enough absorption, it will heal you back up to full. So it's a real kind of balancing act, like using this sword in the right way. You can use it in that combat situation, but also in traversal. And it's really cool. It's just a cool idea. And I think it works really nicely. I would say it would be better if the game pushed at you a bit more. I think the game's not that challenging. It's definitely the easiest of these kind of Team Ladybug games. And that means you don't have to engage with like the healing element of it that much. I did more of that later when the game was getting a bit more challenging. But in the early stages, like you have health potions you can use. You have easily kind of like regainable health by going back to save stations. So, you know, it's nice. It's a cool idea, but it doesn't really materialize until like the back half, and by then, you know, you still have a lot of items you can use to heal yourself anyway. So yeah, it doesn't fully realize those ideas, but I think those ideas are very, very cool. And the fact that they're in there is just, it speaks to them wanting to push the design a bit and like have something unique and out there that isn't really like seen in other games. And because this character, this kind of sword, is like they're made of this kind of like foggy, misty material, they present like different challenges to you, which is like, okay, if you enter this area, this kind of dark poison stuff, that stuff is going to kill the sword if you go with it. So you get these puzzles of, okay, I'm going to stick the sword in the ground, I'm going to go through the mist myself because I don't get hurt by it, and then I will call the sword back to me, but only when I have a clear line of sight outside of that fog. If you call it back to you and it has to go through the mist to get to you, the sword will die instantly and you'll game over, which is pretty harsh. Yeah, no, it'll put you back to the last save point. So the game can be pretty harsh sometimes with its save points. There's a stretch at the very end of the game that's like, oh my god, I was like, this is going on forever and ever and I've not found another save point. And that one...
Is this like save room style? Is that...
It's save room. It's Castlevania save room style. Yeah, Metroid, just traditional save room style. Because
that's what the traditionalists want.
Exactly, yeah. Which I don't mind, because I've always been someone who, you know, has played these games from the beginning, so it's nothing that bothers me that much. But yeah, there's definitely there's that one stretch at the end where I'm like, oh, come on guys, give me a save room for God's sake. And that section has multiple areas where you have to be careful about like putting your sword down and pulling it towards you, otherwise you'll fuck up and go back. And I'm like, oh, for God's sake, like but yeah, I did manage to get through that obviously and finish it in the end. But yeah, I think I come on the show a lot and I'm like, loads of 6 out of 10 Metroidvanias that I feel are like 8 out of 10 Metroidvanias. I would say this is like a step above those, but it's still probably like a 7 out of 10, and I think, for me, I love it and I have a great time and really enjoy it. Is
there much of a story in there?
There is, yeah. It's kind of like, it's kind of telling a story about, I would say these games are not great at that stuff narratively. Like the writing is not particularly amazing, and I think part of it is like translation, localization, because I want to say they're a Chinese studio, maybe they're Japanese, actually. I'm not 100% certain, but they're definitely Asian based, Team Ladybug, and so some of it is like that kind of, it's not been fully translated or localized great, but it's kind of like very typical sci-fi. You're this soldier, you've been like told by this kind of group to go on this mission, but then there's like a pope, kind of, there's a church and like a pope, and it's kind of theocracy stuff going on there. And then there's like a bunch of backstory you find out, and you find out the pope used to be a scientist, and I didn't really understand it, if I'm honest. Like I just, I went along, and you know me with these games, I don't really care about the story, so I kind of watch this cutscenes and read the words, but none of it's really being absorbed. So, something happened there. There was some science. There's a little bit of like, there's an underground resistance of people, and like, people think that it's demons, but this person just has, like, he just looks a little ugly, so they think he's a demon, they want to kill him, and so, like, you set him free. And then there's this whole, like, time loop thing as well, where, like, you die, but then, like, they put you back in a timeline, and you turn into a big monster. There's a lot, anyway. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense. It's not really the reason you play these games, but there's a story there. I would say it's probably the most story they've done in one of these games, so that's something you look for. Then it's there for you, but I wouldn't play this game for that necessarily. It just feels really good. I think that's the thing fundamentally I always come back to with Team Ladybug Metroidvanias, is they feel great to play, moving around is nice. I will say that, like, I found it a little odd. There's a lot of underwater sections in this game where you move really fucking slowly and annoyingly through the water. And I'm like, surely they're doing this so that I can get an upgrade that makes me swim fast through water. Never happens. Never get a swimming fast upgrade. So I was like, why the fuck would you do that, game? Like,
games don't have to have water in them.
They don't.
Like, people love putting water in when it's not wanted.
They love doing it, and it's just slow and annoying. And that's definitely the worst parts of the game, is those sections where you're just like trying to get through this, and there's enemies in the water as well, and like it's hard to kill them because they don't take much damage from your regular attacks. So it was a whole thing, but Blade Chimera, I think it's a really solid pickup if you're looking for something in these dying days of the Nintendo Switch, Metroidvania to play. And it took me 7 hours. I think it's actually the longest it's taken me for one of those. I think Record of Loads 1 and Toho were both 5 hours, so it's a little bit longer than that.
Wow.
Probably
these seem so much shorter than like Dredge and Ori and stuff. But interesting.
Yeah. Traditional. Like, if we think about like the origin of the genre, like Fusion and Super Metroid, like the ones that Nintendo were making before in the early 2000s, before that, they're all 4-5 hour games, right? Like, I think, to me, that's a really strong Metroidvania as a 4-5 hour game, because you can really condense it into a tight little package. And these games follow that model, which I really like, because it's a game that it's a genre I can burn through quite quickly, and they're compelling in that way. So yeah, I finished it like in a few days, pretty handily. Nice. Just because it's very easy to play handheld. So yeah,
awesome.
Blade Chimera, do check it out if you are, like me, a Metroidvania sicko whose hunger can never be cured. So there you go. Bally, I
played a horror game.
A horror game, in fact. So how did that happen?
I've been playing Dredge. I finished it. It took me about 12 to 14 hours, I want to say. And when I say horror, I don't really rate Lovecraftian horror in terms of being scary, or at least what's done in this game. So Lovecraftian horror, I was first made aware of like H.P. Lovecraft and Lovecraftian horror with a spate of board games that came out in like the 2010s when I was getting into board games, and loads of them just feature Lovecraftian ideas. So Lovecraftian horror is essentially the fear of the unknown, and using mist and covering it. It's like, what could be behind that corner that I don't know about? And
it's kind of the tension, right?
Pardon?
The tension kind of build up.
Yeah. like going mad, seeing things in your madness that aren't actually real. These kind of, like, this is all Lovecraftian. That's kind of the ideas, and that's kind of what Dredge goes for. But it's not a very scary one because you can actually avoid most of the horror stuff depending on ways in which you play the game. And that's all to do with the day-night cycle. So for those who don't know, Dredge is a fishing game, and the aim of the game is to gain money, improve your skill tree, but essentially find out what's going on in the world, and it kind of tells a tale. And like I said, the day-night cycle kind of means you can minimize the amount of horror, because during the day it's an incredibly cozy, warm, fun fishing game, and it's at night that the mist comes in, your madness gradually goes up at the longer you stay out at night. Like, it's essentially you're like a fisherman, you're getting more and more tired. Like I like the theming of that, like the idea of you getting more and more tired, more mad, and then when your madness ticks up, more stuff will attack your boat and stuff gets bad. So you need to be careful when you go out at sea not to be trapped in the darkness at night, because bad stuff can happen. And I think that's the fun thing. There's a little bit of a push your luck element, because the scope of the world is fascinating, because at the start of the game your boat moves incredibly slowly and the world feels humongous, and like as you gradually gain more and more speed with your boat, more and more engine power, you can go far further, and you can be more confident of going out to sea, getting some really great catches, and then coming back. And the fishing is done incredibly well. Like, your boat is made up of squares like a chessboard, and essentially everything on your boat, whether it's your lights, your engine, your fishing rods, the fish that you catch, everything takes up like a Tetris piece, like takes up a grid.
Right. It's kind of like the Resident Evil inventory system there's a game on Steam actually called Save Room that is just about that process of like organizing things within like a kind of like you were saying, the block system,
the Tetris. It works so well in this game, because early on in the game you can barely fit any large fish, and as you one of the skill trees is like the size of your boat, and you go bigger, and it's a very satisfying way. On top of that, when you do damage to your boat, random bits of damage appear in your actual grid, and if you have a fish that's lying on a bit that gets damaged, that fish goes overboard, like you lose it.
Wow,
so
that's really interesting.
The risk you don't want to get hit, let alone game over. So if you game over, you lose everything on your boat, obviously. If you get hit once, you risk losing what's on your boat, depending on how full your boat is. If you get damage on an area that's got your fishing rod or your engine, those things get damaged and you have to pay money to fix them. So like it's all those systems are incredibly well designed.
How does the fishing work? Is it a mini game for fishing?
It's a mini game, yeah.
Okay.
So you will see silhouettes under the water and like little precise fishing spots. You go over the spot and then you press fish, and if you do nothing, you will still catch that fish. But the difference is it will take much longer. If you excel at the mini game, it'll speed up the process. So it's a wheel that spins around, and there's like green parts that move around, and you press A and you line up the green parts. And if you line up correctly, you will reel in that fish much faster. If you miss those points, you'll like lose time and it's more inefficient. So it's in your interest to do well. There's two mini games. There's one for the fishing. There's also one for the dredging, which is a huge part of this game. So dredging is for everything, dredging up all the treasure, different things you can pull up. You will see dredging spots. They look different to fishing spots, and dredging has a slightly separate mini game where, if you imagine one circle inside a larger circle, and you're on a line that can jump between, imagine the two circles are like tracks, and you're jumping between the tracks to avoid notches, essentially.
Oh, okay.
If you hit a notch, you lose time. It takes longer to dredge up the stuff. I think with dredging, you can't just leave the game going. Like, you do have to interact with the mini game to dredge up what you need. And yeah, you can dredge up metal, wood, cloth, all these stuff that relate to upgrading your ship. There's even like lobster pots and things you can upgrade in this game. There's like a set of fishing net that you can attach to your boat, and the idea of the fishing net is, oh, you're really into exploring, but you still want to catch fish along the way, so you can, while you're exploring, it will gradually catch fish. I didn't go that far down the lobster pot or fishing net skill tree because I just wanted to focus on improving my engine and my fishing rods, because that's kind of the main part of the game, I would argue. I think this game becomes very challenging if you don't have a fast engine. Like you want a fast engine because by the end of the game you're going all over the place, and it's very, very Wind Waker in its island hopping. Like, this game has so much Wind Waker energy, and when you think about some of the quests in Wind Waker that are at nighttime that do get a bit spooky, thinking of like the ghost ship and stuff, like this game has a lot of those vibes, because there are specific parts of the game where you do have to interact with some slightly spookier, creepier things going on, and I don't ever think that they're that scary, but they're definitely spooky, and you don't want to interact, you don't want to get caught by these things, and I think the game does a good job of, it is Lovecraftian, it's very suggestive, and it's all about what they do reveal more. It's all about what they don't reveal more than what they do reveal, and I like that. And I think that the story in the end is told really nicely. I don't think there's like a big, I guess there is a finale, but I think there's things about the world that I've watched like multiple YouTube videos about, and people are like, oh, and did you know this and this? I was like, oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, I didn't notice that. And I did do quite a lot of side quests, but I wouldn't say I did all of them. And there's quite a lot to discover in the world that's just kind of very suggestive, and it's just a really, really, really impressive package. And I think it's an incredibly simple game when you break it down. Actually, it's essentially islands with fish you're collecting. When you go to so I should have said the main core quest are collecting 4 or 5 knickknacks from 5 specific areas in the game, and
right, so you kind of got a MacGuffin to go after.
You've got to have a MacGuffin to go after, and each area has one, and you are essentially catching fish and giving them to specific people in each area in order to trade in the MacGuffin. But in these areas, there's sometimes hostile things that will try and get you. There's different. One area is very maze-like. Another area is like got cliffs and looks fine, but then there's actually a secret eel that is just going to come and get you. And there's cool stuff. But it's very simple, and when you put it all together. And
I guess we were talking about this as a loopy boy game. What is the core loop is like. Getting that fish gets you money that then you can use to upgrade the ship itself, or like that's the kind of the loop that you're going through every day.
So money is used to upgrade the skill tree, but also to make repairs on your boat. But you need more than just money to upgrade. You need like these research cogs, and you can dredge up research cogs. You can receive them for side quests. You can buy them from specific vendors. Like there's a load of different ways of getting cogs.
Is there anything to do with like, obviously there's time of day that you mentioned, but is there like regional stuff for going to specifically find, is there any reason to find specific fish outside of like it's more valuable to sell, or is there any? So
specific mainline quests require specific fish, right. But other than that, it's just give me fish to give me money, and you can like, it's up to you if you want to be the collector and get every single fish. I don't know what the reward is for that, for example. I don't know if there's an official side quest for that. It's more just give me fish, and these fish are weird looking and different, but I just need the money. I think one really clever thing I didn't mention about the world and island hopping and this kind of thing is the time stands still when you don't move. So you can be still on the water and get out your telescope and really look around and try and examine, is there something I can dredge over there? Is there something I can dredge over there? So if you do have a much slower boat and you have to craft out your day a lot more succinctly, more uniquely, then you can stop and like use your telescope to like look for things. And it's just a really, really simple thing, but makes the game, I think, much more. You can play this game in so many different ways, which I think is amazing. Like it's so cool. And yeah, I think that, like I said, it's just doing some very simple things, but it just nails the vibes so much. And for someone who liked the Moonglow Bay so much like I did, this is like 10 times like cleaner as a game and more well thought through and better put together, and it's not glitchy in the slightest. It ran amazing on my Steam Deck, and
also just like a lot tighter probably. I think
so
Moonglow Bay was like 30-40 hours or something, you said.
Yes. This game has all that sense of adventure, and that world probably still feels bigger, but is a 12-hour game. Like, I think it's just so immaculately well designed. And yeah, it's a really, really, really special game. 2023 was a year where I was playing, like I said, I played Octopath Traveler and Tears of the Kingdom, and I barely managed to fit many games in around those big releases. And this is definitely one I wish I had got to, but I'm so glad I've played it at the start of this year, because it's a stellar game. It's really cool. I'm nervous it's maybe not your cup of tea, MBZ, because like we've been discussing, it doesn't nail mechanics to the point of, wow, this is so cool and so satisfying. And likewise, I don't think the story stands alone as this great tentpole story. It's kind of like the combination of both that I just really enjoyed. But equally, it's a very short game. Like, you can beat it, you can mainline it much quicker.
Much as you are Loopy Boy, and I am Movie Boy, I think we both trade in the other's taste, like I love a good loop when it's done well. And I talked about really enjoying the first half of Day of the Diver, which is a great loop, very good loop. Stardew Valley, incredible loop. Citizen Sleeper, incredible loop, right? So I think, if the loop is good, if it feels satisfying, then I think that definitely can work for me. I think it's interesting, Bally, that like Cult of the Lamb, Day of the Diver, Dredge, they're all games that feel like exactly to your taste.
Yes.
But you took ages to get to them and like didn't play them as they came out. So I'm wondering if like that's going to change in the future, of like you knowing your taste with this stuff a bit more, of like if a game like this comes out, then you're going to jump on it straight away.
It should. I 100% should have played Day of the Diver and Dredge the day they came out. And I will be trying to be more aware of these games. I think also both those games, at least in the circles I followed, didn't have much build up. They very much came out and then got very good reviews.
Which tends to happen, right? It tends to happen with indies like this. Is it's like, oh, no one's heard of it. Oh, suddenly everyone's playing it.
Yeah. It's just so good. There's nothing really like it. Like Moonglow Bay is very similar, although Moonglow Bay's got a ton of like cooking and more about the money.
It's got more of a farming element to it in some degree.
Yeah. But this game's like, I cannot stress enough how great the vibes are with this game. It's the small stuff. It's like as simple as the first island you go to has a massive lighthouse on it. The lighthouse has a lighthouse keeper. She's very key to like this world and the story. And you can see that lighthouse from anywhere in the world. And like, it's so cool that you can just use that as a reference point, and day or night, that lighthouse is there. There's stuff like you're just sailing along. It's not sailing, it's more a motorboat. And there's just these like killer whales that just like start swimming beside you, or there's one with dolphins. And then there's some other creepy stuff that I don't want to spoil that's very cool that like will swim around past you and this kind of thing. And it's just like, there's so much attention given to how the player feels during the day-to-day loop of this game, which is go out, get fish, get money, and I just really respect the developers for that. Like, I just think it's really immaculately well designed, and as you can tell, I'm incredibly happy, and it is very much not that scary. So I would not. People know me and me said.
Yeah, you barely mentioned any of the horror. We started with horror. Sounds like there's no horror in this game.
Yeah, and we've got an email coming up later in the show about horror games that we'll get to. But definitely give this game a go, especially like for the Wind Waker fans out there. This is like, let's just go do side quests from Wind Waker with a bit of fishing and a bit of spooky stuff around the edges, and that's awesome. Like, it's really cool.
Great. I definitely do want to play it at some point. It was given away for free on Epic over Christmas, so I do have it installed, and I will be booting it up at some point. I do have to play Cult of the Lamb this year as part of my game trade, so I'll be probably getting to both of those.
In no time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great. Well, I think that is going to do us for the games that we have been playing. We are going to take a wee bricky break here, and we'll be back after it with some of your emails. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the second part of today's show. It is that time again. It's been a while. It's emails. Before I get to those emails though, we need to put out the call for some more MBZ.
Need some hot, fresh 2025 emails.
Need some hot emails because a lot of our old emails are getting even older and we always need new ones. So if you would like to email the show, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We also have a channel over on our Discord server. The channel is called Emails. You can put your questions, your comments, your everything else in there. And we'll also read those out on the show. Our first email this time is from Aaron H., who is from the internet. It says, I've noticed over the years that both of you tend to avoid horror games like the plague. As somebody who was terrified of Majora's Mask as a kid and still plays horror games with the lights on, I completely understand and empathize with your aversion to the genre. It's definitely not for everybody. With that said, I have a few horror game related questions for you guys. Where do you draw the line when it comes to horror? Have you ever skipped a game because of its unsettling aesthetic, even if it didn't have any cheap jump scares? Are there any games you feel like you're missing out on, or are you content with avoiding the genre altogether? Have you always hated horror, or was there a specific game or piece of media that made you say, never again? What's the most scared you've ever been while playing a game?
Oh, yeah, great questions. Maybe, Bally, we take them one by one.
Dredge is my limit.
Dredge is your limit, that's it. No more than that. That's it.
Yeah, one by one. Right. Where do we draw the line when it comes to horror? Have you ever skipped a game because of its unsettling aesthetic, even if it didn't have any cheap jump scares?
Yes, definitely. I think the best example of this for me is certain From Software games. So obviously we played Elden Ring. Bally, has played some. I've finished Elden Ring.
I've played 30 hours.
Yeah, and I think both of us have the issue with Elden Ring of, it's a little scary, that world, and it's hard to psych yourself up to play Elden Ring.
It's hard on top of being scary. It's like the combination really hits me.
I'm actually not as worried about the difficulty stuff with Elden Ring, I actually like that part of it. I like the challenge of fighting bosses. The thing that scares me about Elden Ring is the aesthetic stuff. It's less the visual aesthetic, it's more the music, and there's certain areas in that game where the weird violins start happening. Weird violins, I think, is the scariest fucking thing in the world. If I'm going to be brutally honest,
is just that. Just hums the violins, like
dissonant, kind of discordant sounds. Something about music. It's a very powerful thing generally, and I feel like 90% of horror for me is music. Music fucking unsettles me sometimes when it comes to those types of games, and so there's definitely a tendency of me when I'm playing Elden Ring or a game like that to have a podcast on and have the music a little bit lower, so it's less threatening, it's less kind of scary, and it's also why whenever I played that game, it was always a Saturday morning when the lights are on and it's sunny outside. That's my entire because it has to I have to have a contrast to I can't play Elden Ring at night. It's just too much. That's probably why Bally has struggled so much, because he can only play at night.
That's why I've struggled. I mean, I share some of your feelings about the vibes of Elden Ring. On top of the fact you cannot pause the game, and then because I have to play at nighttime with two young kids. I have to play when they're asleep. So it stacks up in a way where I just need a different time in my life when I'm going to come back to Elden Ring and I'm going to beat that game. But that time just doesn't feel right now because unlike you, I do find the difficulty quite intimidating and getting on top of like the mechanics, and also doesn't help maybe that I also chose like a dual magic on top of like combat person, so there's a lot more for me to get my head around than maybe just sword and shield. I don't know, but there's a lot to that game that I find tricky, and the kind of unsettling nature of the world and the enemies is one factor, but it's not the defining factor, I would say.
I'd say the difference is Elden Ring I did want to play because the fantasy stuff kind of overrode it for me, right?
Well,
like
true.
I do like the fantasy aesthetic, and that made me be like, okay, I will play this. A game I don't think I will ever play, and everyone will be mad at me about it because it's everyone's favorite From Software game, Bloodborne.
Right.
Bloodborne is so fucking creepy to me that I will never touch that thing.
You see, I would be up for Bloodborne. Like,
that's surprising to me. That's very shocking to me.
My limit on horror is, I think my rule in my head is this, right? As I want to play the highest quality games, I do not want to play the highest quality horror games. If another mechanic or aspect is the most important part of the game, I can deal with the horror because I want to enjoy the quality. So examples of this...
Because it's not the primary part of it, basically.
Right, so I would be up for Bloodborne because it is not first and foremost a horror game. It is a action roguelike or whatever.
Action RPG,
Action RPG. Likewise, I've played the Last of Us games, which first and foremost aren't horror games. They're narrative-driven third-person action games with a bunch of horror in there. Like, I'm there for the story and want to find out what happens to those characters and go on those journeys. The world is spectacularly beautiful, but yes, I still don't much enjoy like the monster closets and the zombies and this kind of thing. Like, it is unsettling, and I do struggle with those bits. And I have very much so in Last of Us Part 2, I made a conscious effort on certain points. Like, I am just going to charge into this room on purpose to reduce tension, because the game's fairly good at building tension. There's even parts in that game where there aren't any enemies and they build tension and nothing happens. And like, I remember you were a few hours ahead of me, MBZ, and you were like, God, there's one part of this game, Bally, that was just so scary, and then nothing actually happened. And I was like, yep, I know the part you mean now. And yeah, so that's my line. Is I don't think I have a line. Just the thing that the main part of the game can't be horror. Here's another example. Immortality.
Good example.
That game was so much creepier and scarier than I think I had realized.
I had trouble sleeping when I was playing Immortality.
Yeah. It's really messed up. I don't want to spoil it, but there's some messed up stuff in there, and it plays with your mind like it's... I was just saying how I'm not scared by Lovecraftian horror. I think this is an example of I'm scared by Lovecraftian horror.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's not strictly Lovecraftian, but it's more like psychological. But yeah, that game, like I said, first and foremost, it's about the narrative. It's about the unique thing that game is doing with these video clips and piecing them together. That's the crux of it. It's not first and foremost a horror game. So I can, as long as the quality is there, and it very much is with that game, I can put the unsettling horror to the side. Where I'm not keen on playing games, if someone said they've really nailed Resident Evil, the next Resident Evil got a 98% on OpenCritic, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to play it. Because first and foremost, to my mind, that game is a horror game. Like, that's what it's doing. Yes, it's still actiony and this kind of thing, but you're not going to tell me the narrative is as intriguing as Last of Us Part 3. Like, come on, like, it's not going to be, it's not in the same wheelhouse, you know? Like, that's my limit, I would say.
It's very campy, I would say, Resident Evil as well. Yeah. It's going for a different thing. But yeah, likewise, like, everyone talks about Resident Evil 4 as one of the greatest games ever made. Like, non-stop. Everybody loves it. It's amazing. And I have a certain part of me has thought, like, if I played it handheld and the original version, not the remake, so it's less realistic, so it's less scary, maybe Resident Evil 4 is something that I could try one day, but I just never have a desire to, you know? Like, I think, like you said, if the primary goal of it is, I mean, the genre is called survival horror, right? And part of the primary engagement with it is the scariness, and I just don't like scariness. I don't get anything from it. And in fact, it makes things worse for me, you know? Like, I don't actively enjoy it. I think people do it for the adrenaline rush, for all that sort of stuff. Has never done anything like that for me, and I just refuse to engage with it because there's nothing. I'm not getting anything good out of it. So why would I? Like that's kind of my opinion.
What's some of your most scary games? Where do Elden Ring, Last of Us Part 2, and Immortality rank for you, and how scared you were?
Yeah, I think those are kind of my limit. I will say.
Yeah.
I can't really, because I don't go out of my way to play games like that. I think that is kind of where I top out at. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there is anything scary. Like, there's definitely games that have creepy parts of them.
I think there's no coincidence we've also not played Majora's Mask. I played 5 hours of that game way back in like 2017, and I think it's the more so the looping nature of the clock that is more intimidating to me for that game.
Yes.
But there's definitely an aspect of that game that is like, it's also really creepy in points, and that also doesn't...
I think as kids we would have really been unsettled by it, even more so. I think probably a really good example, like you were saying, of like the genre is different and it's a thing that I want to engage with, and so I push through, is Paranormasight. Paranormasight, a visual novel that came out a couple of years ago that I really enjoyed, but it does have jump scares in it, and it's one of those things of like you slowly pan the camera and it takes control. It's like and it shows you a scary face like in a jump scary way, and I'm like fuck off, like it's like I don't need that. Like I want to figure out the mystery here, and the mystery is really intriguing, and like there's just that supernatural horror element to it. Those images of people dead, right, that are just really creepy, and it's just like, it's basically having my vegetables, it's basically how I treated it with that game. It's like, I'm here for the story, I want to figure out the mystery, that's what I really care about, but I have to eat my vegetables, which is the horror elements of this game, basically.
What about Half-Life Alyx?
That's a really great example, and I think that's a great example because it's so fully fucking immersive that, like, I know I've heard of things as well about that game, like later on, where it's like some really scary things could be happening there, and I do want to play more of that game. I've only played like 2 hours deep into it, and it's just the immersive nature of VR with that game especially, and how high fidelity it is. That is, I don't know, there's something about it. It's not scary inherently, it's just like the feeling of being in a world where monsters are there right in front of you. That in itself is scary, even if the monsters themselves, like they're regular video game monsters, right? But because you can see them and you can almost touch them, and they're like to scale, and you can hear them like close to you, like that sort of thing is very transportive. And I mean the game is phenomenal just from a mechanical construction standpoint of like just like using guns and like reloading. All of it is so clever and brilliant, but it is like, I have to really fucking if there's anything I've ever psyched myself up for more, it is that video game. Like Half-Life Alyx is, you've got to really get into a place where you're going to play that, We've kind of covered it, but we'll cover the second question. Are there any games you feel like you're missing out on, or are you content with avoiding the genre altogether? I think it's stuff like every year where people are like, Silent Hill 2, an incredible game, and I'm like, that's cool, guys, I'm never going to play it. Like, I'm glad you all think this is fucking amazing and like has an amazing narrative and all that sort of stuff. Silent Hill, Jesus Christ. Like, I think I remember, Bally, one time when we were younger, we're at Ali T's house and we're playing a demo disc for a PlayStation game, and I want to say it was a Silent Hill game or something like that. It was some fucking scary thing, and we started playing it, and within 2 minutes we were like, fuck this, and we all just like turned down the controller and just like ran out of the room. Me and you, I think, and Ali T was like laughing at us because he like doesn't actually care about that stuff.
He doesn't feel anything.
He doesn't know. But we were just like, no, we can't do this, and we just fucking left the room. And I don't remember what game that was, but I want to say it was a Silent Hill demo of some kind.
We
and
found
I was like,
Tomb Raider scary.
Exactly, yeah. Right. So like, yeah, there was never any fucking chance. But yeah, I think that's the regret, is like, there is multiple years where it's like, this horror game is a Game of the Year contender, and I'm like, cool, I'll never play it, but like, cool for you guys, I guess, right? It's just a shame. It means like you're not exploring the medium as fully as like you would like to, and you're missing out on stuff. But that's just gonna happen when it comes to stuff like this. I just don't I have no desire to put myself through that experience just to get to something that like maybe is really cool. I'm going through this a bit of work right now. Everyone's like, "Oh, you gotta play mouthwashing. You gotta fucking play mouthwashing." I'm like, do I like? And how scary is mouthwashing? Like, one of my colleagues, Tom, he's like very big into it, but he's also scared of stuff. So like when we're discovering stuff, right, and looking at new games on Steam, both me and him are very scared, and Patrick has to be the one who's like, right, I'll do this. I'll play the scary game for you guys. But he's played mouthwashing and said it wasn't that scary. So like he is scared of stuff. So I'm like, maybe I should play it then. But I don't know. The way it was pitched, the way it was kind of sold, is like, oh, it's kind of a horror game, and I was like, I don't know. That's it's a little scary.
The only thing that could make me play that is like that it's 2 hours long.
Yeah, exactly.
If that's the only thing that's making me like, I guess
maybe I should do it. Yeah.
I don't. Do I feel like I'm missing out? No, but as long as I follow my rule, like I said, which is I can play games with scary things in them. I just cannot play them if that's the focus.
Right.
And I think I'll probably stand by that, because once I've widened my net, like that description that includes Last of Us Part 2, Immortality, these games we've talked about. So like, I'm happy with that. I think I'm content, and that's fine if I don't play Resident Evil. Also, I've got way too much to play. Like, I'm hardly like looking for more. I'm not. I feel like I've beaten everything I'm interested in. I better look into another genre. I'm not.
Right.
If I was doing another genre, it wouldn't be horror.
Like when you run out of all video games and you're like, right, I need something new that I've not played. Okay, it's only horror games left. Yeah. Then sure, in a hyperbolic time chamber situation,
exactly,
that was when it would happen. But.
Yeah. Have you always hated horror, or was there a specific game or piece of media that made you say never again? Oh, I've always been a massive chicken. I found 12s terrifying when I was like 10, 11, 12. Like, genuinely, like, I found Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring terrifying when Bilbo Baggins like sees the ring and his face goes weird. Do you remember this bit?
Yes, yeah.
When he grabs the ring back from Frodo, and his face just gets like
in Rivendell, right? Like when he's trying to try on the mithril plate.
Yeah, I found that terrifying. I was scared of like the very first Spider-Man Tobey Maguire film. Like that film freaked me out. Like
Green Goblin in the Mirror, similar situation.
The Goblin in the Mirror, a couple of jump scares. Like they completely ended me at the time. I think I'm a lot better. I'm fine with violence and gore now.
Yeah, that's never actually bothered me.
Yeah. But yeah, actual horror, like I can deal with a bit of tension in TV and film now, but I cannot deal with actual horror. I think the scariest film I ever saw was what was the Alien reboot film called?
Oh, Prometheus.
That's the scariest film I've ever gone to see, and I just like had my hands over my face like most of it.
I was gonna say, did you not just close your eyes the whole movie?
For most of it. And people said that film was rubbish anyway, so it's like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I seeing this stuff?
What are you doing with your life? Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm sure one day when my kids are older, they might be like, Dad, we're so into this film. Let's watch it together. I'm like, okay. Well,
going by the way your eldest is at the moment,
yes.
My guess is he's going to take exactly after
Bally
you.
Jr. He's a very sensitive soul. He's definitely inherited that from me. Caroline's also fairly sensitive, so yeah, we've created a very sensitive boy.
Don't worry, he's gonna hate horror. He's gonna be just like you. It's fine.
Yeah. Bally Chew, we're not so sure.
Bally Chew, I don't know. It could be a wild card. Could be like a sicko for it. Might be the one difference there.
Yeah.
I'm very similar. I think I remember when we were younger, my dad put on The Sixth Sense. The movie where the famous line, "I see dead people," and there's a thing that happens quite early on, and me and my sister were like, and like I think that just like immediately we're like, never fucking show us anything horror again.
That's so twisted from your dad. Just like,
well, we weren't that young. I want to say I was like 14 maybe, so it's not actually that young. So I should be able to take it, but we were both like, no, fuck this. Like we are not about this. We never want to see this again. So that was definitely a moment in my life of like, yeah, I fucking hate this shit. I don't see why people enjoy this. Like, why would you put yourself through that? Makes no sense to me. I also have an overactive imagination. I think that plays into it. I am very much like, at night.
Oh,
you know, when I was younger, I would like look at the ceiling and like imagine things like on the ceiling, and like I'd be like scared to have like any piece of my body outside of the pillow because I can imagine a skeleton coming and taking me or whatever.
Listeners don't know your swimming pool situation.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. When I was scared of going to the swimming pool when I was younger because I thought there were sharks down there. Because like the lines on the ground, like this got to a point where my school teacher basically simulated a swimming pool with a petri dish by putting water in it and like simulating the lines underneath, and she's like pointing to it and is like, "So tell me what's scary here," and I'm like, because the lines looked like, you know, something had come out of them. So I was
Don't
like,
mind all these 20 kids just in the water with the sharks. Don't mind them. Just
no.
It
was the lines on the floor. I thought something would, you know, it was like, I thought it was like camouflage or some shit, and you know, a shark was gonna come out.
How else are you meant to measure the lanes?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's terrible. But so that's kind of where I was at with terms of scary stuff. So yes, I've always been this way, I think, and I've never seen reason to change, so I haven't. So that's why, and I think, you know, all the other things that me and Bally have in common, this is definitely one of those unifying things of we're like, fuck that, we're never gonna do
massively.
that. So yeah.
The most scared you've been while playing a game?
Ooh.
Mine is, there is a specific boss fight in Last of Us Part 2 that I don't want to spoil, but it relates to ground zero of the breakout, or whatever they call it. There's a famous boss fight in that game that I don't want to spoil.
Right, yes,
but,
yeah.
That was intense and scary. The build-up is well done from like a horror perspective, and there's actually a moment where I respected, like, this is actually really well done in terms of horror and making me feel tense, but I have now defeated this boss and I don't want to do that again. That was kind of terrifying. More than terrifying. Yeah. That was worse than immortality for me.
Yeah. I don't know, like, the most scared I've ever been, because for me it's not like individual moments. It's more, like I said, it's the overarching stuff. It's the kind of tense music. I think, you know, tense music is always something that's going to make me, if it's nighttime and I'm playing, so I wouldn't call like Danganronpa or the 999 games scary necessarily, but they do have moments of like creepiness to some degree. And like if I'm playing one of those games at night, like that can, so there's a specific ending of 999, the Clover ending, which is really dark. And I remember playing that like at 11 p.m. in bed, and I was like, "Oh, this is unsettling." Like, so it's stuff like that. If it's more to do with like the moment in which I play it. And Paranormal Sight was like probably the peak of that, because I was in bed at night playing it, and there was jump scares happening, and I was like, "This is a bad idea. Why am I doing this to myself? Like, I should play this on a Saturday morning, like I play Elden Ring, you know." But it's usually that situation is. It's more like, when am I the most scared playing a game? It's at night in bed, and there's creepy music happening. Usually, that's usually when I'm most scared. Right. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, that's and I should also say, Aaron sent that around Halloween last year. We just never got around to it. But no, really great question, Aaron. And we'll we'll keep going through the world of horror games, but it's a very slow, long process. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah, you know, like we'll only get there when people are like, "Oh, well, we made a game in a genre you like, and whoops, there's horror parts of it, so you have to deal with it." So yeah.
Our next question is from Discord. It's Jasmine from Leicester. Says, "Hello guys, quick little discussion question today. As we enter the end of the Switch's lifespan, what are some little things that annoy you about the current Switch that could be easily fixed? Mine is the fact that you can't turn the console off from the controllers when in TV mode, instead having to get up and press the button on the Switch itself. It's a little thing that doesn't really matter, but yet every time it makes me irrationally annoyed. I already know you're going to mention the lack of D-pad, but interested in hearing what else bugs you about this great system. Keep up the great show. Jasmine, Leicester, UK. P.S. Has Bally made a map marking where all the listeners are from yet? We know how obsessed he is with knowing where we're all from." I feel like YouTube used to do that for you, like it would just do a map. I don't know. I've not been in the
heat map of like locations.
Yeah. And obviously that's YouTube, not listeners.
I think we might have a bit of that on our podcast back end as well. There's definitely stats on there. So
we can look that out.
Yeah.
Quick point. I think you can turn the Switch off from TV mode. Am I missing something?
I guess it depends on what she means by turning it off. If we're talking about complete shutdown, something that I actually never do with my Switch, I don't think it's really built to do that. Then maybe, but if we're talking about sleep mode, I mean, I put it into sleep mode all the time from Pro Controller because I have it connected to my monitor here sometimes, and you just go to the home screen and press the power icon on the right hand side, and you can then just put it instantly into sleep mode. Right. If we're talking about fully turning it off,
I think you can go into the settings and it's in there. You can power off manually,
right?
Like it's weird.
Or is there? I feel like you can hold down the home button for a certain amount of time, and it brings up a menu,
and then it'll that side menu will come
that
up.
You can shut things down.
I'm quite confident there's a way of doing it. It's not as easy as it should be, so I totally get why Jasmine might have missed it, but it's definitely something I want to see fixed. For example, on Switch.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Little annoyances. I mean, D-pad is the most obvious one.
Where do we start, honestly?
We just fucking hate this thing. I don't have that many about the Switch. I think it's a pretty robust piece of hardware, generally speaking. I think the Joy-Con attaching to the Switch and how stable they are has always been a bit of a bugbear, right? Like,
seems like that one they're hitting the nail on the head with that one, with the solution of the magnetic things. They seem to clip in. We've obviously not had hands-on with official Switch 2s, but we've had hands-on with replicas that like other people have 3D printed and whatever, and people have said it links in pretty damn snugly, more so than Switch 1, which is positive.
That's good, because so story about my Switch OLED. I never really had too many issues with the original. It was pretty tight on there when you put a Joy-Con on, and it never really felt like you lost any give or anything. Switch OLED, I got it, and immediately I was like, oh, this feels different. This feels off. Like, it's not as secure in there. And I was looking up online, a lot of people were having this issue with OLED for some reason. And it really fucking annoyed me. Like, when I'm playing it, like, it's a very tiny thing, but it's like slightly off skew. So like the bottom of the Joy-Con is not exactly flush with the bottom of the Switch. And so there's this little kind of like divot that you have from Joy-Con to Switch, and that's on both sides of the Switch. And so what I ended up doing was I went online to look up some solutions, and people are like, okay, you just buy this tape, this electrical tape essentially, and you peel off like a tiny thin bit of it, and you put it on that little area on the bottom of the Switch, basically where the Joy-Con connects, and the tension between that and the Joy-Con that it creates snugly keeps it in place. And I was like, what the fuck? That's crazy. So I went out and I bought electrical tape, and I just, tested it with a couple of different layers. Like, I kept changing how many layers were on there. I think 3 layers was what I found was the sweet spot. And so to this day, I still do not take the Joy-Cons off of my Switch OLED because they're so tightly packed in there with the electrical tape that I never, because getting them back on is a pain, basically. So yeah, they're basically permanently attached, but they are super tight now. They are absolutely like rock solid on the Switch, but I shouldn't have to go out and buy electrical tape and like put it on the side to make that solid feeling from the Switch. So that's definitely a big one for the new system to make it feel like one singular piece of hardware. You know?
One controversial one I have is I might be over the lack of a D-pad, and Nintendo might have converted me, and that's probably really bad.
Well, you've always been the person who plays 2D platformers with an analog stick, like a disgusting person, but...
Yeah, but I played on my sort of podcast paternity leave. I played a good 5 hours of Celeste, and I was predominantly... So I went back and did some B-sides. I've not talked about it on the show. And I was predominantly using the I didn't say the D-pad, the buttons.
The non-D-pad, yes.
Yeah. And you've obviously played way more Celeste than me, all the B-sides, all the C-sides. Were you using the buttons as well?
I use a combo. I mainly did use the buttons, but when Madeline turns into a, you get the flower and you turn into an orb of light, that orb of light controls much better with an analog stick because of the nature of it. So I would swap to that when those segments happened, but majority of the time I was using the buttons. And, you know, it probably did contribute to how many fucking hours I spent on those seasides, because it's just not quite as precise as a D-pad is and what you would want from that level of control.
Oh, it's like, I would have been so much faster if I'd had it.
I would.
Here's the thing, though. I played a bit on TV, and I tried using the D-pad on the Pro Controller, and I like D-pads as well. I don't think the D-pad on the Pro Controller is very good. And
it's not, no.
It keeps flicking up or down when I'm trying to press right, and it just doesn't read it as well, I think.
To be frank, like, Nintendo are not great on D-pads this generation. I think probably Sony has the best D-pad this generation.
Yeah, that one's good. The Xbox one's very clicky. Which I don't love. Yeah. I do like the mushy Sony PlayStation 1 for sure. And I think that previously Nintendo were very good with like the Wii U D-pad. That was
Wii U had a great D-pad. Yeah.
So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. Like, I don't know why they keep changing it. So that is annoying.
I get why they're doing this, why they are not changing it. It's because of backwards compatibility stuff, right?
Yes.
Like, they want to keep it so that if you want to do the little mini controllers, then you can do that. But it's just very annoying that they have kind of decided to keep that the same and not change it. Yeah, I mean, I guess like original Switch, the what do you call it? The thing that makes it stand up, the kickstand.
Oh yeah, it's awful. Yeah.
It was terrible, but they fixed that with the OLED, so I wouldn't cause that like much of a concern, really. Like, that was, you know, if you still have an original Switch like Bally does, then, you know, it's annoying if you ever want to do it that way.
Yeah.
But they did already fix that, so I wouldn't say that really counts as a thing.
I hope that the fan on the Switch 2 is better. A lot of people's fans I've heard are going. Mine is basically gone.
Right.
And like, you can hear it whirring a lot more.
Mine was like that before I swapped out to the new one. Yeah.
But maybe that's just what components do after 8 years. I don't know. Like, so if they put in the same fan and it does that after 8 years, I'm not going to be too mad, because I'll have had 8 years of console use, you know? Like, so we'll see if they can make something a bit better. I don't know.
Much as we dislike the D-pad stuff, I think the worst buttons on the original Switch are the fucking plus and minus buttons. What the fuck is up with those, right? Like, they are so tiny in this annoying to reach corner. They're sharp as well, so they hurt if you like move your finger on them in the wrong way, and they click in a way, like, it's hard to press them. They're just these tiny little fucking things, and they've kept them the same for Switch 2 again.
I do miss the Wii U DS Lite mushy buttons.
Yeah, exactly. The mushiness. I've always been a mushy boy. If we want to add more boys to the equation, we're mushy boys, not clicky boys.
Mushy goes well with your strange thumb technique as well, I think.
It does.
Yeah.
Which is why the DS Lite is one of my favorite systems of all time. DS Lite is the peak of mushy button design. Like, an amazing mushy D-pad, really good mushy buttons, like very, very nice and squishy and good to control.
Do we know if Switch 2 will be buttony or mushy?
My assumption is it's going similar to Switch, you know,
I think you're right. Yeah.
Seeing how it looks.
I hope those buttons are they a little bit bigger than the Switch one, if the Joy-Cons are bigger?
Well, I guess overall the Joy-Con is bigger than you'd assume, so the buttons are bigger.
I feel like the buttons don't look small, which they would if they kept the same size of the Switch one, but then made the Joy-Con bigger. So the fact they don't look disproportional means I'm inclined to think they are bigger.
Yeah, I think they definitely are. But I think the biggest problem with me, I think the minus button might be the worst individual button because of its angle next to the stick. Like, the stick takes up so much space that your thumb to get over it has to like reach over, and you can accidentally like angle the stick in a way that does something to move your character on screen when you don't want to move them. So I don't know if they were to make a change to that, I would just replace the location of where those buttons go, because they're not in a good location basically for anything. So
other small things, if they don't go for like all the cool UI stuff that we've been requesting, can they at least have more than 2 themes? I feel like that's just like a bare minimum, but we've already discussed that. So
Yeah, I think one thing we know they are going to change, which I think is actually quite a big problem, is the charging situation. Switch was always bottom charging because of its dock situation. You had to put it in the dock. But what it meant is if you ever wanted to charge it and have it in like handheld, tabletop mode where you had the kickstand out, you would never be able to do that because the charging cable goes in the bottom, and so you can't charge it while you kickstand it, which I think is just a design flaw of the way they built it. And they built it primarily around the switching aspect of like putting it into the dock, taking it out of the dock. But now that we have two of them, hopefully that top one can also be used for charging, which means that you don't have to charge from the bottom part of it anymore, and you can be a bit more flexible with it, basically. Like, if you're on a plane and your battery's at 10% and, you don't want to hold the Switch in your hand while it charges and the wire kind of comes underneath it. Like, I feel like the wire underneath is a problem in bed as well. So the thing that I like doing at the moment with my Steam Deck is, like, playing it in bed, but, like, leaning the bottom of it, like, on my blanket. And the Switch I can't do that with because the charging is at the bottom, not on the top. Whereas the Steam Deck, the charger's at the top, so I can plug it in at the top, the wire is like next to my bed, whatever, but I can like snugly kind of push it against the blanket and there's no issue there. Like, it's comfortable to hold in bed because it's charging from the top angle.
Here's something the Steam Deck has that I'd like the Switch 2 to have is multiple vents for the cooling.
Yes.
I think depending on the way that you might have a cushion on, and you definitely need a cushion under your Steam Deck because this thing's so damn heavy. Like, I don't like having it just on my lap. My arms get exhausted. If the Switch 2 is anywhere near the weight of the Steam Deck, which I don't think it'll be, I think it'll be far lighter, but obviously it will weigh more than the Switch 1. I want multiple air vents so that you can cozy up in a cushion in different positions and not worry about the thing just overheating because the vent's in the wrong position.
That makes sense. Yeah.
If I went back and like analyzed the image, I'm sure I could see vents or not. I don't know. I predict they'll just do along the top like they did with the Switch 1, but we'll see.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I think beyond that, you're just nitpicking, really, because I think one of the things that at the end of the day, when I first opened the Switch, I was like, wow, this thing is like the sleekest piece of hardware Nintendo's ever designed. Like,
I remember when you did that unboxing video, you were like, quality. Look at the quality of
this. I know. Like, well, quality. I mean, we've been Nintendo fans our whole lives, and so like we're so used to just bog standard shit. Here's
my Fisher Price toy that I'm opening up, and I can drop out of the first floor of this building. But
exactly. To be fair to them, right? Like, it was very durable hardware that they made, but it never felt luxurious, And Switch was the first time it felt like a luxury piece of hardware that wasn't just functional, because Nintendo was so functional before, and they were like, it looks like this, and it's a little ugly, but it will work. It will have bumps and scratches, and you'll be fine. And the Switch is the first time where it's like, I think Jeff Gersman dropped it and it fucked up the rail for his Joy-Con for the rest of it, and I'm like, yeah, I guess that's what happens when you design it to be this way.
It definitely feels like the first time they've not done the kid height drop test, or if they did, they didn't care about the results, because I feel like DS, 3DS, DS Lite, Game Boy Advance, you name it, you can drop that from 1 meter high or like a kid's height, and then it'd be fine. And you just, because of the rails, because of the nature of the Switch, it's just not the case. I wonder if the Switch 2 will feel more durable as a result, if they'll reinforce it a bit more, because it is that solid thing and it won't have the rails in the same way. I don't think they will, to be honest. We'll see.
Yeah, I have high hopes for it from a kind of hardware standpoint. I think it's a shame that it's probably just going to be regular screen, no OLED off the start, which means we have to buy another one, which I will do, because having seen the light...
I will do as well.
Yeah, now having seen the light of OLED, I'm like, well, I'm never going back again. I was going to say another small thing that was annoying, but they did fix it in the OLED, which is the memory card slot. Like, original Switch memory card slot is just like...
Used to be in the stand.
Well, it is in the stand on both, but like I think it's just the way that it's hidden, the way that you put it in and take it out on OLED is much smoother versus the original, which I think was just a little finicky basically to get it in there.
Yeah.
I think, micro SD card slots are always a bit fucking finicky, but the Switch original was especially so. So, yeah, any adjustments to that would be appreciated, I think.
We're at the start of February now. Start of April's not that far away, so I'm looking forward to seeing some more of this thing.
Yeah, we'll have some more answers. There were some patents that leaked out this week. I don't know if you saw that. That was showing that, yes, the mouse thing is very real, and that's exactly what they are going to do with it. It's going to be mouse-driven. So we'll see what goes on with that and see how many of our mouse-driven predictions come true. But I think at the end of the day, it's a pretty great system, and I think there's small things that we'd love for Nintendo to fix about it, but at the end of the day, it's great. The Switch is great. So,
it's very good.
Yeah,
it's very good. But we are ready for a new one.
We are. I'm so fucking ready. I am so ready to start playing video games on my Nintendo system again, because I'll be honest, I haven't been playing a lot on Switch for a while, So yeah, we'll get back onto it. Great. I think that is going to do us for this show. Thanks everybody for writing in with your emails. Bally, if anybody out there listening to this show right now would like to write in, get their question answered, where would they write that fine email to?
Please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Great stuff. Get on it. You can also go to our Discord and leave a question there if you so desire. We, of course, have to thank some people for supporting us on this adventure, this show. If you go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, you can get some bonus episodes, support the show, and get some fun stuff. And we'd like to thank some of our patrons, Bally.
Yes, thank you. We've got a brand new patron there, Alexander P. Thank you very much for your support. But thank you also to our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan, Turtle, Orange Thunder, and of course Ali T. Thank you all for your support. But thank you also to all of our patrons. We really, really appreciate all the support you give the show. It helps us keep on top of game releases, this kind of thing, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely. You can find us in various places across the internet as well. We are on Blue Sky mainly at this point. I'd still apparently my Twitter just keeps getting followers because my colleague Wout keeps retweeting or replying to my Balatro related tweets.
You need to tell him, look, Wout, I'm trying to take off here on Blue Sky. Can you go do more of there?
Well, the thing is, he did it on... But okay, so Balatro hit 100,000 reviews on Steam, which if you don't know is fucking insane. Like, the number of games that have 100,000 reviews on Steam is very, very small.
Most games just want 100,000 sales, right? Like...
Yeah, exactly. And it's madness. So I tweeted, I was like, oh, this is just mind-boggling, right? And so Wout replies to that with using the Balatro account on Twitter, and now that tweet has 30,000 likes, my tweet does. So I'm like, for fuck's sake, my notification's just on fire. And then same thing happened on Blue Sky, did the same post over there, but he reposted it from that account, so my Blue Sky notifications are also on fire. So basically, over the last week, my notifications have just been on fire, and I've had to turn off notifications. I've had to mute. I've had to mute it for those specific ones because.
Is this what it feels like to be a celebrity on social media? You cannot look at your interactions.
It is really interesting when this happens because you do get an insight into what it's like to be someone popular who gets tweets with that many likes and mentions and all that stuff on it. And it's weird because I'm like, to some degree, you're like, oh man, imagine what that much engagement is. But it's like, the thing is, there's so fucking much of it that it's like, you can't even pass any of it. So it's just white noise. Like, it just becomes complete white noise.
I'm famous. It's just noise.
Yeah, exactly. It's too much. A person can't handle it. But anyway, shout out to Wout for boosting my engagement on social media. So anyway, you can find me there at LordNBZ on Twitter and NBZ on Blue Sky. Bally, where can you be found?
I am at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91, and that's on both Twitter and Blue Sky.
Absolutely. You can obviously find the podcast at TNL Podcast. Just look us up. You'll get updates about the show and all episodes coming out with it. And of course, you can find the show on the internet in various places, or on Spotify or on Stitcher. You can download us on any podcasting app that you have. You can rate and review us. You can rate us on Pocket Casts as well. I believe so. I saw that you could actually click the 5-star button on Pocket Casts, and it gives a rating. It adds to the rating. So I don't know what's going on there. It feels like it's a weird mix of ratings, but not sure how it works.
I noticed we're on 89 Spotify ratings. It'd be awesome to like get past 90 into 100.
Yeah, we should do that. So please do that. And yeah, you can write reviews. I think iTunes people don't do anything with these days, but Spotify is a good place if you want to give us a good old 5-star on there. That's probably the best place for us to be reviewed. So please do it. That's very much appreciated. And that, I think, is going to do us for today's show. Bally, what are you going to do in the next couple of weeks? What's your video game plans?
I want to play some Lonely Mountain Snow Riders. I very much enjoyed the first game.
Yeah, I have played a good amount of that, so we can have a good conversation.
Yeah,
maybe we can try the co-op. Let's see if that works. That'd be a good thing to check out.
And then kind of just counting down to March, because Split Fiction is coming out in March, and we are pumped for that. And I'm not sure I'm jumping on any new releases in February, to my knowledge. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the main one for me is, of course, my boy Majima, and we're doing some pirating on the high seas with my Yakuza army. So
a bit of Black Flag. Combat.
Yeah.
I might jump on that game later in the year, depending on how it does and how that combat is.
I mean, all of the Yakuza games come to Game Pass at some point in time, so it'll probably be on there eventually. But yeah, I'm looking forward to checking that nonsense out. And there'll be a bunch of other stuff as well. I'm sure I'll chip away the backlog. I'm trying to clear out some of these games I've just been in the middle of for a while. I finished Lufia 2. Which is great. That's been
it took you 3 years?
About 3 years on my
tubes?
commute of playing Lufia 2, yeah. I started Final Fantasy 2 on GBA, so that's my next commute game, which I'll be enjoying. And a bunch of other stuff. I'm trying to finish Trails in the Sky, the first Trails in the Sky game. Need to get back to Bayonetta Origins. A few different things I would like to knock out before starting anything
new. Rabbids game you were playing.
That's been on my backlog for like literally
Skyward
2 years.
Sword and stuff.
Skyward Sword I got rid of. Yeah, well, I'll go back to those eventually. You know, we'll finish everything eventually, but there's only so much time that exists out there, and such time has come to an end because we're at the end of the show. So thanks everybody for listening. We will be back at you in a couple of weeks' time with some more podcasting about video games and all the fun things that go along with them. Till then, thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Bye. The musical interlude used on today's show was Serious from Blade Chimera. Copyright Team Ladybug 2025.